Could I ask those people who are in the next press conference to come to the podium, please, the Enlighten press conference. If you could come to the podium, please. Thank you very much. I hope so. If you will start with that, and then we can't do it otherwise.
Should I go up there just in case, or
Right. Yes, we need to. Mark, if you'd just like to come up on our behalf until Akin comes. Okay, the order I'm going to go in is in the order of the ministers, if they're here, and go on to. I will go on to you, David. First, Akin will make some remarks if he's here. Then the ministers, and then. I think we need to start. Do we have the Minister of Uruguay here? And do we have the Minister Peters from South Africa? If not, we have to start anyway. All right, welcome to this press conference of the United Nations Environment Programme and the Global Environment Facility. I'm very pleased that we are expecting Minister Peters of South Africa to join us, and we're also expecting the Uruguayan Minister of Housing to also join us. But as we know, these press conferences are very sharp and quick, so we better get moving, and the others will join us as they come. I hope you have a copy of the press release. If not, Caroline has a copy there. That's excellent. Okay, so my name is Nick Nuttall. I'm the spokesperson for UNEP. I'm very pleased to have on the podium at this moment, we have Mark Radke from UNEP's Energy Division in Paris, Technology, Industry and Economics. Mark Radke. Then on his left, we have Harry Vierha, who is a Senior Director on Energy and Climate Change at Philips Lighting. Next to Harry, we've got Wolfgang Greger, Senior Vice President and Chief of Sustainability at OSRAM. One of the partners of this initiative. We now have Achim Steiner, UN Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, who will take his place on the podium. Thank you, Achim. And we also now have the Minister of Uruguay, who is also coming now. That is Graciela Musaria, Minister of Housing, Land, Planning and Environment. Okay, the plan was to start with you, Mr. Steiner, after the niceties. Right, we've run out of a chair. Okay, so Mark, you're going to have to. There we go. It's one of those so-called photo ops. Right. Excellent. Mr. Steiner, I'd like you to perhaps open with a few remarks on the advantages of a phase-out of old light bulbs in favour of more energy-efficient ones. Remember, it's a very tight press conference. We literally have 3 minutes for each person. Mr. Steiner.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, fellow panelists. My role as Executive Director of UNEP is simply to introduce this press conference briefly. I think as you walk the corridors of this conference of the parties, you often ask yourself, can this actually produce results? Does it make a difference? And I would like to use this morning's press conference simply to point to one very practical but very significant initiative that the world would not have embraced if it had not been for an overall awareness about climate change, about the need to decouple the growth of electricity and power provision and energy use in our societies from carbon emissions. Clearly, as the world is looking at the issue of access to energy, provision of electricity, which, remember, on this particular continent means really 3/4 of the population in Africa still do not have access to modern electricity systems and services. It means the world has to expand the access to electricity. The question is, do we do this as we have done it for the last 200 years, which is by adding more and more power production and therefore more and more fossil fuels and more emissions? Or do we do it in a way that technology today allows us to do it? And the Enlighten initiative, which is funded by the Global Environment Facility in partnership with a number of private sector partners, some of whom are here this morning, and an alliance of countries, has set itself the objective of, by 2016, essentially replacing incandescent, inefficient lighting on this planet with a newer generation of energy technology, electricity provision technology. The simple fact is, and I mean, just looking at this roof here, we are probably still in the 20th century version of lighting, but let me put it very simply. Technology allows us today to provide the same amount of lighting to people, to houses, to industry, for 1/10 of the electricity that was required just 20 years ago. Because if you take the shift from the incandescent light bulbs to energy efficient lighting to LED technology, it literally means that you need 1/10 of the electricity. And we can debate, is it 1/11 or 1/10, 1/9, whatever. The margins are remarkable. And this is basically what we are trying to communicate, first of all, to the international community, that action on this is as relevant to industrialized countries that have to reduce their energy consumption as it is to developing nations that have to increase the provision of lighting services. And this initiative is an attempt to help countries, first of all, by providing them with the templates and the experience and the approaches by which you can regulate the markets in such a way that these technologies are phased in more quickly. Secondly, how you can use legislation to phase out old, inefficient technologies, as has already been done in most OECD countries, but also in Mexico, in Brazil, in Cuba, and many other countries. And thirdly, how we can assist also countries that, in a sense, have to overcome the financial disincentive, because, yes, more efficient technology is more expensive to buy. It's cheaper to run over its life cycle. The problem is, if a light bulb on the shelf that is efficient costs twice as much, it's difficult for poor people to buy. So also, how do you approach the financing issue? It's not a matter of economics. The energy efficient light bulb will cost a person, a household, less over the time that it is installed. But at the point of purchase, we have still an issue. So it is the financing and pricing issues, it is the legislation, it is the incentives that are provided. So that, in a nutshell, is the core of this project, which is helping countries make something happen that is perfectly doable, is being done by countries, and we want to achieve by 2016 a world that has left behind a technology that is redundant and is an anachronism in today's availability of options. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask the Minister from Uruguay, who was one of the first countries to join this Enlighten initiative, to give us her perspective in Spanish.
Buenos días a todos y a todas. Es un gusto estar acá. Uruguay se enorgullece de haber sido el primer país en unirse formalmente a la Asociación Mundial del PENUMA en búsqueda de una estrategia mundial contra la iluminación ineficiente. Nosotros tenemos como país razones de distinto orden para tomar como prioridad estas acciones. En primer lugar, el tema concreto de reducir las emisiones de anhídrido carbónico, pero fundamentalmente enfocado en acción prioritaria del país en lo que tiene que ver con la lucha contra la pobreza y la indigencia. Nosotros unimos especialmente el tema de facilitar el ahorro de energía a nuestros habitantes con las acciones que tienen que ver con la iluminación eficiente. En ese aspecto hemos iniciado el camino de promoción de la eliminación del uso de lámparas incandescentes y estamos iniciando junto con el PENUMA acciones que tienen que ver con acciones tributarias que faciliten la introducción de lámparas eficientes. En el 2009 hemos aprobado la reducción y la eliminación de los impuestos a la importación de estas lámparas y está en camino la reducción de los impuestos internos de valor agregado que tienen que ver con estas acciones. Hay dos miradas a las cuales también debemos propiciar la introducción de mecanismos de acción. Una tiene que ver con los estándares de calidad de las lámparas eficientes, ¿no? Uruguay no es un país productor de mercurio y quiere prestar especial atención a la calidad de estas lámparas. Como país hemos participado, creo que desde siempre, en todos los convenios sobre productos químicos. Estamos en este momento presidiendo las negociaciones internacionales para obtener acuerdos vinculantes sobre el mercurio y consideramos importante también laudar normativas de calidad de las lámparas fluorescentes compactas que nos permitan justamente cuidar la no introducción de lámparas con elevados contenidos de mercurio. El otro aspecto tiene que ver mucho con el desarrollo adecuado de los países no desarrollados y tiene que ver con políticas de manejo de los residuos, de manejo de estas lámparas, ¿no? Políticas de acopio y de reciclaje para impedir afectar la salud o afectar el medio ambiente. Y en ese aspecto también apostamos a que el programa nos permita contar con el asesoramiento y las capacidades tecnológicas que hoy como país no tenemos. Tenemos dado ya los primeros pasos en este hacer en el cual acordamos ese horizonte 2016 sin lámparas incandescentes, que implica el trabajo con nuestra empresa nacional de producción de energía eléctrica, con la Agencia Nacional de Salud y con una de los municipios más grandes del país, el municipio de Maldonado, para iniciar experiencias piloto en el manejo sustentable de esta modificación de nuestras estrategias de consumo. Por lo tanto, Uruguay tiene muchísimo interés en el éxito de este programa y desde las diversas ópticas o los diversos impactos que tiene este tema, hace un llamamiento a nivel mundial a integrarse a los demás países y a apoyar este emprendimiento. Son pequeñas acciones que suman mucho en la lucha mundial contra el cambio climático y son pequeñas acciones que a nivel de los países desarrollados implican cambios en la calidad de vida, implican mayores capacidades de nuestra población. Muchas gracias.
Right, thank you very much, Minister. We're here really to announce a couple of... sorry,
just 3 sentences just summarize this.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
See that
Yes,
some
okay.
may not have seen. I mean, just very briefly, the Minister has a statement here also. Phasing out program, Uruguay, one of the first countries to join it. It is very keen to facilitate the introduction of energy-efficient lighting. It has taken a number of steps in terms of government policy initiatives from, for instance, if I understood correctly, removing import tariffs or reducing import tariffs, new mechanisms that also address the issue of quality standards in terms of production of light bulbs, particularly also the question of new policies on recycling. As you know, energy-efficient light bulbs have the issue of mercury, for instance, and how safe disposal can be assured, which is an issue of public health. The government has committed itself to the target of moving towards 2016. It has initiated already a number of pilot programs and projects, both in terms of interministerial cooperation, but also with local authorities in terms of phasing in and experimenting how this could be done. And I'm looking at you, that I'm capturing all this correctly. And the Minister ended by saying that Uruguay fully supports this initiative, views itself as committed to doing this at a national level, and also regards this as a classic example of how the international efforts on addressing climate change can be addressed at the national level through steps such as this energy efficient lighting program. I have not done justice to what you have said, but in essence, that's what it was.
Right. Thank you very much, Executive Director. New talents, which I wasn't aware of. Thank you. We're here really to announce a couple of important things. One is that this 2016 date, which was just mentioned, is now the aspirational date for the phase-out of old light bulbs across the world. One. Two, that South Africa is going to be setting that target, and David's going to speak to that in 2 seconds. And three, that it's still a big challenge because there's over 130 countries that still allow the old light bulbs, the incandescent light lamps, in their markets. So it is still a big challenge. Now, there's David Rogers. He's a senior energy specialist at the Global Environment Facility. They are, in a sense, the financier of this program. And David, you could briefly address some of those points.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're here to celebrate a spectacular success in public-private partnership that's focusing on energy efficiency and reducing emissions. On behalf of CEO Madame Monique Barbu, we're congratulating the government of Uruguay and the government of South Africa. Let me just have you remember 3 things about this initiative. Private sector leadership. Private sector technologists and research specialists have developed these new lighting technologies that are going to make a tremendous difference, but they also brought the priority for environmental sensibilities to this program, and we thank them for that. Number 2, this Enlighten initiative focuses on standards and quality products. We have to get beyond the myth that the bottom of the pyramid consumers don't care about quality. In fact, quality is paramount if we are to achieve the energy efficiency gains and the emissions reductions that we seek. And our private sector partners have shown us that quality pays for itself over time. And third, let me just mention how important the Enlighten initiative believes that national governments need to be taking action on energy efficiency and on lighting. We've heard from our minister from Uruguay of their important efforts. We congratulate Minister Peters and the government of South Africa on their initiative. Through the phase-out of inefficient light bulbs, they will save enough electricity to power more than 4 million homes. So this is an energy access effort, and it is bringing electricity to people who do not have it now. And we're very proud to be here, and we say siyabonga to the government of South Africa for their efforts to promote efficient lighting. And we hope to do more of the same across Africa and across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we're going to take questions. Harry and Wolfgang are resource people for the tough technical questions. Can I ask a journalist who would like to speak to put their hands up? And we have a roving microphone, I believe. Who would like to go first? The lady here, second row.
My name is Elise Tempelhoff. I'm from Beeld. I just want to ask you, maybe I'm very ignorant, but why don't we move to the LED light bulbs if the CFLs are so poisonous?
Right, who'd like to take that?
So that's a very good question, and what you see happening is that South Africa, not only in phasing out incandescent light bulbs, but also in leapfrogging to the newest available technology, setting the example. Because just last Wednesday we announced with Eskom the largest LED retrofit agreement for Africa. So 200,000 LED retrofit bulbs. Africa is leapfrogging in many ways, also around the ICC venue. At night you see LED street lighting. So I confirm your point is relevant, and it's happening today.
Next question. Gentleman here.
Hi, Mike Savo from Thomson Reuters Point Carbon. I'm just wondering, in this initiative, are you using any of the Kyoto mechanisms, for example, programmatic CDM, to forward this initiative, or any others under the goal, the 2016 goal?
Who would like to take that question? Wolfgang.
CDM is a part of the initiative. That means the countries who would like to join CDM programs, like India, like Mexico, and a few other states, they are making use of it. Yeah. But not all countries have a good greenhouse gas emission factor, so not all countries are ideal countries for CDM programs.
Sorry, what are you saying? Okay, the
no
programmatic,
POA,
you mean the
Well, in
regional
India
things.
we have a POA, in Mexico we have a POA, there are a few POAs on the road, yeah. For the enlighten, it's country by country. Each in South Africa, according to my knowledge, not, no.
Thank you.
It is
The gentleman
true
there.
that the characteristics
Mark.
of this program on a country-by-country basis make it very suitable for the CDM.
Yes, Tony.
Hi, Tony Carney, Independent Newspapers, Durban. There is a perception that some energy-efficient lighting has side effects from a health point of view in terms of epilepsy or other mental disturbances. I'm not familiar with all the details, but is there an investigation or a health study into that aspect of mental issues and epilepsy? Thank you.
Wolfgang.
I can only tell you from a study from the European Union called CENHERE, and independent scientists have proven that this is not the case. I can give you the details of the study, and it was only released very recently, and there is now a stakeholder consultation forum going along with that. They are going to continue, but this is not the case.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The lady there with her hand up, with the reddish hair, it looks like in the light.
Anna Leidenrich, SABC Radio News. Why is it still a costly technology? I mean, you've said over a period of time the consumer will eventually save, but if we take into account that people, especially in Africa, are very, very poor, so for them initially to pay 10 cents more in our currency makes a difference. So why is it taking so long to make it affordable and even cheaper than the current bulbs available, for example?
Okay, who'd like to take that? Harry?
That's a very important question. I think in general, when we look to sustainable solutions that address climate change and broader, we need to look different at cost, because we mostly focus on initial cost and we neglect the life, let's say during use, we neglect the economical, ecological and social cost that is actually happening in many cases. If you look at compact fluorescent LED lighting, the cost curves have come steeply down. And if you look including performance, then already today, for all applications, also for Africa, the most economical decision is to move to energy efficient solutions. What needs to be looked at and what is being looked at is how to smear out the initial investment over time. And I think that is happening. And I expect also that here in Africa, steps are made forward for consumer lighting. On professional lighting, already lighting services, financing exists, amongst others from us as Philips, but also from other companies. So we need to look differently at cost, because it's a broad issue and solutions exist.
Mr. Steiner.
Just a brief remark. I think this is why this is not just an issue of the consumer walking to a shop and having to make a choice between a more expensive and a cheaper light bulb. This is where governments are called upon to enable a society, a nation, to make a faster transition. Products cost what they cost. It is a matter of technologies, it is a matter of economies of scale. The more you produce, the cheaper they become. Let us remember photovoltaic panels came down in price by 50% a year and a half ago. So I think we have already seen the price come down. The question is not so much the economics, because it does pay for itself, it is the financing. So governments do have, I think, a very significant role to play here. Just like South Africa has begun to work on solar water heaters and a program together with Eskom to try and phase in solar water heaters more quickly, it pays in the end. And as you heard, South Africa could provide electricity to 4 million more people as a result of phasing this in without having to put 1 additional megawatt of power infrastructure in place. So governments can buy down the price, particularly at the early phasing in stage. And I think this is why we are working with governments. And you heard from the Minister of Uruguay, you can reduce tariffs, for instance. That already brings down a differential. And you can also subsidize. You can have an introduction program. And I think these are the kinds of methods that we have seen where countries are indeed able to rapidly bring these more efficient lighting technologies into the broader society. So the issue is really financing, and government has a critical role to play here.
Right. Any more questions? Tony, I'll wrap you up with a question, but if there's anybody else that's not asked a question. Okay, fine. Then we'll have this lady here, and then Tony, and we finish. Thank you.
Maybe I've missed something, but what is going to happen to the old bulbs? I want to know what I have to do with my...
Right. Wolfgang is going to tell you.
Recycling is a part of the Enlighten project. That means it's a holistic part, and that means a holistic project in all of the countries. We start from standardization, quality, financing, and it goes to recycling. That means we will also come in our toolbox with proposals, and actually the industry, we ourselves are going forward, and in many of the countries in the world, and the biggest countries, we have already started to do recycling projects.
Right, and Tony, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great pity that the Department of Energy isn't here to give their perspective. But has there been any progress, I wonder? Are there schemes like a refit tariff for bulbs or anything concrete that's been agreed to in South Africa on how to make this initiative financially more doable?
Yes, Mark, do you know?
Look, we would have wished the government to be here this morning, but as you can imagine, we are now in the really hot phase of negotiations. So we said to the minister and the department, look, focus on the negotiations. We will have the press conference here. I'm sure you have many possibilities to ask the government. As you know, there have been programs that ESCOM has already looked at in terms of distribution of light bulbs. I think that was a kind of pilot initiative. I think that as part of President Zuma's announcement in terms of the green economy strategy for South Africa, and the issue of energy efficiency and lighting is an integral part of that. And I do not want to second guess at the moment, because I have not been able to look at the details of the program that has been announced. But within that, I am aware that the issue of energy efficiency and lighting was part of it. I think what we are working with South Africa, as with other countries, is to simply look which policies have worked, because there are many different experiences that are today available to us, and they don't necessarily translate from one country to another. But in South Africa, clearly, given that electricity infrastructure already reaches a large part of the population, the incentive to rapidly phase out inefficient light bulbs and introduce more energy efficient technology is an integral part of the approach that South Africa is also taking to managing its energy efficiency overall. I also believe that we will see in the coming years, as you have heard, the next leapfrogging to LED technology. LED technology at the moment is still, from a consumer point of view, a luxury good, if you want. From the perspective of our long-term lighting strategy, LED is the way that the world will go, and therefore I think again it would be interesting to see in which parts of South Africa's economy can you fast-track LED technology. And it may not necessarily be the individual household as an entry point. It may be large industrial estates, etc. And then you begin to bring the price down per unit. But I think we look to South Africa as a country that has signaled over the last few weeks a much greater ambition in making these transitions happen, and in that is also the whole question of lighting.
David had a very quick point on that, and then we have to wrap up.
I just wanted to say that we've been very pleased to work with the Ministry of Energy and the Department of Environment here in South Africa on a follow-on GEF-funded project where the government has committed to strengthening their energy efficiency standards and labeling program for lighting and white goods. And we would expect that program, in fact, to put into place some of the regulatory requirements that may be needed to achieve the savings that Mr. Steiner was just mentioning. So we are very pleased with the regulatory steps that they're taking.
Thank you very much indeed for coming, and I hope it was worthwhile. Thank you. Great, thanks.
Ja, kann ich noch einen?
Didn't know Donatella Versace was here. I didn't know Donatella Versace was here. Zsa Zsa Gabor. He's uncanny.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Guatemalan delegation, I give you the warmest welcome to this press conference. First, let me give you a brief introduction about Guatemala, a mega-diverse country, multicultural and multi-ethnical. It is located in Central America, and its territorial extension is of 108,089 square kilometers. Guatemala is part of the first founding civilizations of the world, rich in pluriculturality. Guatemala is aware of the need to act responsibly and in a dignified manner, proud of being the cradle of the Maya and ancient civilization. While negotiators are at COP17 discussing the future of our climate here in Durban, countries like Guatemala are already suffering from climate change and paying the price. May I present to you from left to right, Mr. Omar Morina, Sub-Executive Secretary of the National Council of Protected Areas, CONAP. Mr. Juan Carlos Campollo, Vice Minister from the Ministry of Agriculture, MAGA. Mr. Alejandro Maldonado from CONRED. Dr. Luis Ferrate, Presidential Commissioner for Climate Change and Head of the Delegation. Mr. Carlos Ramiro Moino, Minister of Environment, MARN. Dr. Ferrate, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome everybody to this press conference. First of all, our country is one of the most vulnerable to climate change in the planet. It's among the 10 most vulnerable countries, and definitely the one or two number in the continent. We are suffering the multiplying, intensifying, and magnifying effects of climate change in an already vulnerable country due to the social conditions, environmental and territorial conditions. Climate change is creating a very big social, human life, national security and economic problem in Guatemala. And there are three processes that I want you to understand that is going on in a country that was a corridor of life with all the Central American countries and is becoming a corridor of death. In one of the processes that the impoverishment process continues, especially for the indigenous people populations and rural people. And this is a process that is based upon the economic model that we have adopted, that in order to synthesize it, all the losses are being socialized and the profits are being privatized. And you cannot live in a country like that where the losses are socialized in the environment and the most vulnerable groups, and the gains are privatized in small groups that have economic wealth, the military, and others. And this is a process that we can control to a certain degree, but is affected by the external and internal shocks. In the other hand, we have the delinquent, the process of the consolidation of the delinquent economies, because in the north we have the users and consumers of drugs. 47 million people in North America, Canada, United States, and Mexico that demands drugs from the south. And this corridor of life that was Central America is becoming a corridor of life. of death. And we are paying a lot of money due to insecurity and the drug activity. Therefore, in one hand, we have to invest in the reduction of poverty, and in the other hand, we have to pay in security for our citizens. And then comes the third process, that is the process of climate change that has, as I say, a multiplying and intensifying effect in the other two processes. Then we don't have the financial resources or the technical resources to deal with the impoverishment process and with the security process created by this addiction in the north to the best quality drugs that are being produced in the south. And as I can give you some examples, when we have a flood and the peasants lost their crops during the year, they plant 3 times their crops and they lost them, then the drug lords get them to plant coca or poppies or any other drug for the use in the north, and they make by far more money in a short term than planting grains or other crop. This is just one small relationship between the 3 processes. But on the other hand, we have had many hydrological extreme phenomena that I am going to let the word to the person that knows the most, that is Dr. Alejandro Maldonado, the head of CONRED. He will explain them. And then we will open it for questions. Please, Dr. Maldonado, explain what is going on in the last 10 years with this phenomenon that is hitting us very hard.
Mr. Maldonado?
Thank you. We have seen in our country the direct impact of climate change. In the past few years, we have seen an increased number and increased frequency of events. As you might know, the earliest tropical storms and hurricanes that come to mind are in 1998, Hurricane Mitch, which had a tremendous impact in the Central American region. About 7 years after that, we had Tropical Storm Stan. And then beginning in 2008, we have had a direct impact due to climate change every single year. In the year 2008, we had Tropical Depression 16. The year 2009, we had drought conditions. Then in 2010, we have a big storm by the name of Agatha, followed by 4 other tropical storms that same year. And this year, we have suffered the consequences of Tropical Depression 12E, as well as the rest of the Central American countries who have felt these effects. We know that there is an undeniable relationship between poverty, disasters, and the development of our nation and the Central American region. Therefore, we feel that it is imperative that we come to agreements regarding climate change, that it is very important to take into account the indigenous peoples of our countries and their needs, and a clear need for adaptation. It is also important to note that we are also working as a region. In a couple of days, the presidents of the Central American region are going to convene in El Salvador, where they are going to discuss climate change and the need for integrated risk and disaster management for the region. We feel that the impact we are suffering is very high, both in terms of the number of persons who are killed or directly affected by disasters originating from climate change, but also a huge economic loss, which prevents or impairs the development of our nation. Thank
you. Just to give an idea, in a quantitative way, what is going on, Guatemala has produced less than 1/3 of the historic greenhouse gases. Is particularly nil, but is one of the countries that is a victim of the emissions and concentrations of greenhouse gases. And it represents, let's say that Michigan stand, when we quantify it, it has represented 7.5% of the gross development produced. Agata has represented 4.1 of the GDP, and the latest 12, the tropical depression 12E, 4% of the GDP. If we take into account the last 20 years, the average is 1.3% of the GDP. This is an enormous amount of money that we are putting in adaptation and mitigation. In the total terms, in the last 15 years, we have lost. We have economic losses of about $9 billion, and we have get aid of no more than $200 million. The rest of the money we have put it with our own taxes. And therefore we don't have money for development, because we are in a permanent emergency and a permanent rehabilitation and reconstruction. When you come to this conference, I wonder how many more Guatemalans, Central Americans, and people in the world should die in order to come to an agreement. This is a matter at the end of human rights and national security. Our country is becoming very hard, very difficult to live, because climate change should be seen as a national security problem. When you lose bridges, highways, houses, you have mass movements, and all the losses come to billions of dollars per year. It's very difficult to come to a place like this and to notice that purposely they delay the solutions for the future. In other words, they don't want to compensate, they don't want to pay for the damage that they have done in the past and they will. And I want to be very plain, and I will open the floor for questions, because my colleagues will answer some of them, I will answer others, reminding you that Guatemala is the cradle of the Mayan civilization. They discovered the zero, the double zero. They have the most perfect calendar in the world. They have astronomical observations that were the best until the NASA agency came. And this is a culture that we are not willing to lose due to impoverishment, due to drug trafficking, and especially by the multiplying effects of climate change. We have to protect our culture. We have to protect. We have been a reservoir for more than 120 foods that we have provided to the whole world, starting with maize, beans, cassava, sweet potato, peanuts, and so forth. I don't remember the 120, but when I start, I remember probably 50 to 80. Then we have given the world a lot of food, a lot of biodiversity, a lot of medicines. We are a mega diverse, not just biologically, but culturally. And we Guatemalans, we are not willing to lose that. Thank you.
The floor is now open for questions and answers, and I urge you to please stand up, say your name and the media you work for or the organization. Please stand up. Yes.
I'm Jeff Kelly Lowenstein from OI, the Chicago Tribune Spanish language newspaper, and a CCMP fellow this year. And my question is for you, Dr. Frate. In 5 of the last 7 years, according to the United Nations, Guatemala City has had the highest murder rate of all the largest cities in the world. And I wondered, what role does that also play in the struggles that you're describing with the poverty, with the drugs, and then with the climate change, that in terms of the trauma on the community, the social safety, and so on? What role does that violence play?
Unfortunately, this is truth. And about 80% of the deaths are related to drug trafficking and cartels. But some of them are not in Guatemala, are in Mexico and in Colombia. But Guatemala has a very porous border with Mexico, and the consuming countries have very well covered the airspace and the maritime space. They can control it, but not the land. Therefore, as I was telling you, it was a corridor of life, and now it's a corridor of death. And we are investing so much money in public safety, but also in private safety. There are about 32,000 national police, but there are about 70,000 private police in my country. And that put us in a position that the money that we should use for development is being used for safety. And one of the problems also is that the young people may see that making dirty money is very easy, and then our youth is having problems, and we are protecting, and we have special programs. Therefore, everything is going around security and climate change. And for this reason, I mentioned that we have almost lost $9 billion in the last decade, a little bit more than that in the last decade. And the money that comes is for security and for impoverishment, but not for climate change. For this reason, we want additional money for climate change.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I don't know if my colleagues want to expand.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Javier Triana de la agencia EFE. Well, I wanted to ask, are you confident to go back to Guatemala from Durban with new funding to address the mentioned issues? And if affirmative, what amount are we talking about?
I don't think that the Guatemalan delegation is going to collect a lot of money here, because this is not the purpose of coming here. The purpose of coming here is to show the state of our country, and with the other Central American countries through the SICA integration process have a position. The money comes after this is publicized. Definitely, today we have a meeting, some people have a meeting with some potential donors. The EU cooperation has been very good to us. We are the first country that has a depth swap in climate change with Germany. And they have provided us some money, but it's not enough, because the reason that Dr. Maldonado was saying, we're in a permanent problem. I mean, it's not that something is going to happen next year. It's going to happen today and next year, and the last year and in 2013. Therefore, what we are doing is we are doing surgical investments in the places that have the greater risk regarding population and our infrastructure. We are losing the infrastructure that our parents, grandparents, and other generations did in my country. We are losing a lot of things, and the watersheds cannot withstand rain the rainfall pattern is changing. I live in a farm where we have never had more than 40 millimeters per hour. Now we are getting 80, 90 millimeters per hour. No highway is going to resist that, because the highways are designed for 20 millimeters per hour. Then climate change is really creating a new set of rules. We cannot use the average hydraulic balance for design infrastructure. We have to use the extremes, the Niña years, the Niño years. Niña years means extreme rainfall for us. Niño years means extreme drought for us. Then I want you to convey the reality of what is going on. Unfortunately, I live in the highlands and in a safe place. But most of the Guatemalan people live in unsafe places, even in the city, within the city.
Thank you. Yes, please, gentlemen.
Hello, Dennis Moynihan, Democracy Now! Many indigenous populations are also often caught between the factions involved in drug trade and counter-narcotics, and also are displaced in forest preservation schemes under the RED program. So what aspects, policies are in place in Guatemala to protect indigenous populations and campesinos, especially given that your incoming president-elect, Otto Perez Molina, was himself implicated in the mass murder of campesinos in the 1980s?
Well, let me tell you that I will not get into Otto Perez Molina, because I don't know him. I don't know him. I had to leave the country in the 1980s. and one of those ones that left the country in the 1980s. But regarding the indigenous populations, most of them live in the highlands, and the highlands are deforested and with a lot of mass movements, and they are in danger of losing their homelands. But on the other hand, the people that migrate, because migration is, and I want to, that you hear this in a very good way. Migration is the last measure of adaptation. And the people will migrate north if the environment will be destroyed in our countries. But what is going on is that we got the people engaged in drug activity in the forest, because they need a very clear view, and they want nothing in the land, because in that way they can see planes, police, army coming, and they go. And they used to go to the forest, but now, due to technology, we can get them in the forest easier than in the forested land. And the narc activity is destroying our forests, it's destroying our national park system that is one of the most important ones. And some Kekchi populations are being driven by numbers to open agricultural lands, and they have the right to do it, because they don't do it. But there are other populations that are not indigenous that are being paid, and are people from the eastern part of the country, go also to the forest. Then we have a double problem. And the forest, the national park system, is the best vaccine against climate change, and we have to protect it. And sometimes people have been evacuated from national lands, but mainly they have evacuated drug lords. There are about 70 huge farms that have been taken by the government. But this is a very big issue. And on the other hand, some Indian lands that they have used for many, many years, the mining ministry have given permits to do exploration and exploitation of mining. And they don't care for the indigenous populations. They are the ones to be blamed. And I have had a personal fight with them. Everybody knows that in Guatemala. But they are very big multinational companies that can raise private armies. This is the case. And there are some corruption among the national police and national army. I cannot deny it. But they believe that the ministry, I am not in Ministry of Environment anymore, he's the Vice Minister of Environment, but they believe that we kind of heroes that can do everything. No, we are just normal people, but with guts that face other ministers, even the president, but the transnational companies. I blame very much the transnational companies to do to do the damage that is done in the territory, but also in our cultures. They don't respect the cultures. I was addressed by a big executive of a big company, and he told me that national culture should adapt to mining culture. And I said, well, you are completely crazy. You have to adapt to our cultures. Mining is just an activity. And the other thing is that they don't respect, there is not a legal mechanism that we have to make vinculante, binding the decisions of the indigenous people. And therefore we have a very big problem in that area.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, I would like to proceed with a very short documentary that will show you what the great problems that we're having in Guatemala. And also right after, we're going to have Doña Lola be giving very short interviews. She's a Mayan woman, and she can tell you right from her own knowledge later on what she feels the questions have been raised, and also talk about the cosmovision, the Maya cosmovision, and if she is able to also talk about the year 2012, which is not the end of the world, and she will tell you what is it all about. And so we will proceed with the short film that we have brought for you. Thank you. Guatemala, pagando el precio.
Guatemala, país megadiverso, multicultural y multiétnico, forma parte de una de las 5 civilizaciones que fundaron el planeta. Con su pluriculturalidad, heterogeneidad y capacidades diferenciadas, Guatemala ostenta soberanía y dignidad.
Siendo la cuna de la civilización maya, hoy Guatemala late orgullosa en el corazón del mundo maya, el hogar de una de las más grandes civilizaciones que la historia ha conocido.
En su seno encontramos ecosistemas que van desde los humedales del Pacífico hasta los bosques nubosos de la alta montaña. Sin embargo, es un paraíso terrenal que ahora está en riesgo. Por ende, Guatemala busca la solidaridad de todas las naciones y pueblos del mundo, especialmente para las poblaciones indígenas y campesinas más empobrecidas, que son parte de una sociedad olvidada y discriminada, y que además es la que más sufre ante la multiplicación de fenómenos que se generan con el cambio climático. A pesar de su relativamente pequeña extensión territorial de 108.889 kilómetros cuadrados, Guatemala está situada sobre 3 placas tectónicas, la de Norteamérica, la del Caribe y la de Cocos, debido a su ubicación geográfica en medio de 2 océanos. Pero con el agravante de estar en la ruta de huracanes del Atlántico y en la ruta de tormentas del Pacífico. Además, con 33 volcanes, 3 de ellos activos, hoy Guatemala se le cataloga como el país más vulnerable de todo el continente americano y en 4º lugar a nivel mundial.
Guatemala es un país expuesto ante el cambio climático, un fenómeno del cual no somos responsables, porque es muy poco lo que aportamos con gases de efecto invernadero para el cambio climático, pero la alta vulnerabilidad del país pues nos expone, nos agrava situaciones sociales, económicas, y verdaderamente necesitamos que el mundo entienda que el cambio climático es un acelerador de factores socioambientales, ¿verdad? Exacerba enfermedades, incrementa la pobreza y expone a nuestra juventud a ser carne de cañón del crimen organizado.
Dentro de ese marco que estamos viviendo, es una realidad. Y obviamente Guatemala fija una posición no de confrontación, ni tampoco de limosna. Fija una posición en que dice, nosotros tenemos de tener aliados, porque solos no podemos salir. Y de ahí nace el contexto de la alianza para nuestro futuro.
Entre las tormentas Mitch y Stan, el impacto económico que el cambio climático ha tenido sobre Guatemala ha significado la pérdida de 1.736 millones de dólares, 7.5% PIB, Producto Interno Bruto. Otras tormentas como el Ágata, el Alex y la erupción del volcán Pacaya arrojaron para Guatemala pérdidas de 1.550 millones de dólares, siendo el 4.1% del menoscabo del PIB, y hoy con tan solo la depresión del 12E, el daño ha llegado a entre 3% a 4% del PIB.
Los programas de salud, seguridad, educación y otros han quedado relegados al segundo plano. Todo ello producto del cambio climático, lo que ha llegado a cobrar vidas humanas, destruyendo cosechas y gran parte de su infraestructura vial. Cada invierno que se avecina promete nuevos estragos cuando ni siquiera se ha podido empezar con la reconstrucción.
A pesar de que Guatemala no es de los principales responsables de las emisiones de gases efecto invernadero, hoy recibe los impactos de estos fenómenos. Su vulnerabilidad se debe a que Guatemala es un país empobrecido, en el cual al menos el 51% de la población está desnutrida y muchas de estas personas viven en ubicaciones o viviendas mal construidas que las ponen en alto riesgo. Para Guatemala, como para el resto de países centroamericanos y estados insulares, el asunto va más allá de simplemente bajar los niveles de carbono.
En Guatemala sabemos que nosotros no aportamos más que el 0.003% de gases de efecto invernadero. Prácticamente es como que dijéramos cero. Sin embargo, estamos conscientes de que el cambio climático es un fenómeno global que no podemos eludir y tenemos que enfrentarlo. Esa es una cruda realidad. Eso implica que como guatemaltecos tenemos que establecer planes estratégicos de desarrollo, impulsar el desarrollo sostenible, manejar adecuadamente nuestras áreas protegidas, donde está nuestra biodiversidad, nuestra reserva de agua, nuestros bosques, pero también debemos de trabajar en las áreas secas y desérticas del país, en donde a pesar de esas condiciones todavía hay agua suficiente como para cambiar el paradigma del agua y adaptarnos mejor a la presión del cambio climático. Y desde luego impulsar la gestión descentralizada de las cuencas, subcuencas y microcuencas del país, porque nosotros pensamos que para adaptarnos y mitigar tenemos realmente que descentralizar la gestión administrativa del Estado y entre ellas la gestión de la problemática ambiental.
Mientras en las negociaciones de las convenciones Marco de Cambio Climático de Naciones Unidas, los países industrializados discuten sobre los estragos que el cambio climático les traerá, países como Guatemala están poniendo los muertos y pagando el precio, pues los huracanes, tormentas y depresiones tropicales ya están a la orden del día.
Por lo mismo, Guatemala requiere de la solidaridad de todos los países del mundo como aliados en la búsqueda de mecanismos para la pronta adaptación al cambio climático que le ayuden a afrontar el problema.
Este fenómeno de depuración del aire que respiramos, al final, pues es un beneficio para toda la humanidad. La circulación del viento por el planeta a través de los océanos que sale emanado de istmos como Centroamérica y en particular de Guatemala, al final pues beneficia a Europa, beneficia a Norteamérica y a otros países. De tal manera que en la medida en que el mundo entienda esos beneficios que nosotros podemos dar y que ellos se solidaricen e inviertan en bonos de carbono para que nosotros cuidemos esos bosques que tenemos y esa gran biodiversidad que tenemos, estamos contribuyendo también con toda la humanidad.
En el marco de políticas sobre cambio climático y sus instrumentos de ejecución, Guatemala ve la importancia de una plataforma que facilite, acelere y asegure el abandono del paradigma de que tanto los recursos naturales como el consumismo desmedido pueden ser ilimitados frente al crecimiento económico, pues no estamos frente a ilimitados recursos naturales del planeta. Debemos velar por la búsqueda tanto del bienestar material como espiritual sobre la base del conocimiento y el respeto mutuo de cara al cambio climático.
En Durban, Sudáfrica, Debemos encontrar soluciones frente a la ronda de negociaciones, a fin de adoptar las decisiones correctas para dar cumplimiento al mandato de Bali y al diseño del multimillonario Fondo Verde que debe beneficiar a los países con mayor vulnerabilidad climática.
Fundamentalmente esperaríamos que de la COP17 que se va a realizar en Sudáfrica, el mundo se comprometa en serio. Eso significa que nosotros deberíamos tener acceso al financiamiento de los grandes capitales mundiales para tratar de invertir en la recuperación ambiental de Guatemala, especialmente en su masa boscosa. Eso es muy importante porque en la medida en que eso se haga, nosotros vamos a poder estar colaborando con el mundo para enfrentar el fenómeno del cambio climático.
La vulnerabilidad que hoy vive Guatemala, que está siendo exacerbada, magnificada y multiplicada por el cambio climático, busca la solidaridad de todas las naciones y pueblos del planeta hacia esa parte de la sociedad más olvidada, invisibilizada y discriminada.
Hoy, Guatemala, el país más vulnerable de todo el continente americano, busca solidaridad ante los ojos del mundo entero que están a la expectativa